The suns were burning overhead, two bright fireballs in the purple sky. The sand shifted with every gust of wind, hot and dry. Half buried under that sand lay an alien woman, motionless. Her pale violet skin covered in dust and bruises. Her silver hair was tangled with blood and cracked mud. Her eyes were open but dull, empty, and filled with tears that had long dried. Her name was Sari. She had once been part of a noble alien house, dressed in rich fabrics and guarded by tall soldiers. But now, no one stood beside her. Her family had thrown her from the transport shuttle, left her in the desert like trash. She had begged them, cried, screamed that she would do better. But they said she was broken. Her leg had a birth defect slightly twisted and that made her unworthy in their eyes. They didn't even grant her the mercy of a quick death. They pushed her out and flew away. And now she waited for death. Her skin was burned, her throat dry. And something was circling in the sky above. Vultures. Not birds, alien beasts with wide leathery wings and long sharp beaks. They circled slowly, waiting for her to stop breathing. One landed nearby. Watching with glowing red eyes, Sari could not move. Her leg was swollen, her ribs ached, and her energy was gone. She closed her eyes and whispered something in her native tongue. "I'm sorry, Mother. I really tried." But then, a strange sound echoed across the desert. Not the wind, not the screech of beasts, something softer. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Someone was walking through the sand. The vulture beast hissed and flew up. Circling away in alarm, Sari blinked. Trying to lift her head, a shadow fell across her body. It was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a strange helmet. He knelt beside her and took off the helmet. His face was human, his skin suntanned, his beard rough. He looked into her eyes and said just one word. "Hey." Sari coughed, tried to speak. But only dry air came out. The human gently lifted her head and placed a water pouch against her lips. She drank slowly, gasping between sips. Then her voice came out, broken and weak. "Why did you come?" The human didn't answer right away. He pulled a cloth from his bag and began cleaning the wounds on her forehead. When she flinched, he said, "Easy. I'm not here to hurt you." Her vision blurred, but she could feel something strange. Warmth, safety, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She shook her head slowly. "No. Leave me. I'm worthless. Just let them finish it." Her eyes looked toward the vultures again. The human followed her gaze, then stood up. He looked at the beasts, then at her again. He knelt, scooped her gently into his arms, and began walking away. Each step was slow, but strong, steady, and determined. Sari tried to resist, but her body was too weak. Her head rested against his chest, and she listened to the steady beat of his heart. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered again. He finally answered, his voice low. "Because no one else did." They walked for over an hour until they reached a broken shuttle half buried in rock. The human entered, laid her gently on a makeshift bed, and covered her with a blanket. He turned on an old heater and gave her more water. His supplies were limited, but he didn't hesitate to share them. She watched him move, confident, focused, human so different from her kind. She whispered softly, "What's your name?" He glanced over and gave a small smile. "Jacob," he replied. Then he looked at her seriously and asked, "What's yours?" She hesitated. No one had asked her that in days, maybe weeks. "Sorry," she said at last. Jacob nodded. "Well, sorry, you're safe now, outside." The twin suns began to set, casting orange and red shadows across the desert. Inside, Sari drifted into sleep. Her fingers curled into the blanket. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. But danger still lurked beyond the dunes. And something had picked up the trail Jacob left behind. Sari's story wasn't over. It had only just begun. Asterisk, the wind outside howled against the broken shuttle like a crying ghost. But inside the metal shell, it was quiet, only the soft, steady hum of the old heater filled the space. Sari lay under a blanket, her pale body trembling from exhaustion and pain. Jacob sat across from her, watching carefully as she slept. He had seen many strange things on this desert moon. Buried ruins, alien bones, forgotten tech, but he had never seen anything like her. An alien woman left for dead by her own people, and even more shocking, she had thanked him for saving her, then begged to be left to die. When Sari opened her eyes again, hours had passed, her body ached. But the burning pain was less now. She turned her head slowly and saw the human sitting there, still awake. He had dark circles under his eyes, but his posture was alert. She blinked, confused. "You stayed?" Jacob leaned forward. "Yeah, I did," he said, voice calm. "I wasn't going to leave you out there with those creatures." She looked down at her twisted leg, now wrapped in cloth and resting on a folded jacket. Her hands clenched the blanket. As shame filled her chest again, "You don't know what I am," she whispered. "I'm broken. Cursed. Useless. My family said it was better to throw me to the desert than keep feeding me." Jacob didn't answer right away. He reached behind him and pulled out a small can of heated soup. He held it out to her. "Hungry?" he asked. She hesitated. Then nodded slowly. He helped her sit up, careful not to hurt her injured leg. As she drank the warm soup from the container, tears welled in her eyes. No one had treated her like this in years, maybe never. "You don't even know my kind," she said quietly, "and yet you do all this." Jacob shrugged. "I don't need to know your species to know you were suffering. Pain looks the same in every life form." That made her look up. Really look at him. He wasn't just strong, he was kind. His eyes didn't look at her with fear or disgust, only concern. For a moment, she forgot about her shame. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly. "Why not leave me there like they did?" Jacob looked away for a second, thinking. Then he spoke in a low voice. "Because I know what it feels like to be left behind. My squad. They abandoned me during a mission years ago, left me for dead on a frozen moon." Sari's eyes widened. "What happened?" "I didn't die," he said with a slight smile. "Someone found me, just like I found you. And they didn't ask questions. Didn't care about politics or species, they just pulled me out of the ice." Silence followed, deep and heavy. Outside, a creature howled in the wind, but neither of them flinched. In that quiet moment, something changed between them. Something unspoken. Sari stared at the small heating lamp, her voice barely a whisper. "My people believe the weak should not survive. They call it noble blood purification. If you're born imperfect, you're removed." Jacob clenched his jaw. "Well, that's not how I see it. I see someone who's alive, breathing, and worth saving." Tears fell from Sari's eyes again. But this time, they weren't just from pain. They were from a heart that had never been seen before. "You humans are strange," she said, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "You give kindness for nothing." Jacob smiled. "Not for nothing," he said. "I get something in return." She tilted her head. Confused. "What?" He tapped his chest right over his heart. "Peace." She blinked, stunned by the simplicity of his answer. Then her smile returns, small but real. "Your peace comes from saving broken things." He chuckled. "Sometimes the broken things are what remind us we're alive." Suddenly, the shuttle beeped. A low-pitched warning tone came from the corner. Jacob stood quickly and looked at the console. He cursed under his breath. "What is it?" Sari asked, fear creeping into her. Voice again, "Motion sensor," he said. "Something, or someone, just passed through the outer scan range." Her face went pale. "They're looking for me," she whispered. "My family, they must have sent someone to finish it." Jacob looked at her, eyes hard. "Let them come. You're not going anywhere?" Sari looked at him, her eyes wide. And for the first time, she truly believed that this human wouldn't let anyone hurt her again. But outside, something moved through the sand, silent and patient. They weren't alone anymore, and the danger was just getting started. The wind outside had calmed, but inside the shuttle, tension filled the air like a heavy blanket. Sari sat upright now, wrapped in a blanket. Eyes locked on the blinking red light of the motion detector. Jacob checked the console, his jaw tightening. "It's not an animal," he muttered. "They're moving slow, controlled." Too smart, Sari's hands clenched in her lap, her breath shaky. "It's them," she whispered. "My family must have sent hunters. They always send cleaners to cover their shame." Jacob loaded his pulse pistol and tucked 2 extra cartridges into his belt. He handed Sari a small shock knife. "Stay close to me," he said firmly. "If anything happens, don't run. Don't scream, just follow my voice." Sari stared at the blade, her hands trembling. "I've never held a weapon before," she said, voice shaking. Jacob crouched in front of her. "Well, there's a first time for everything," he said with a faint smile. "You're stronger than you think." Suddenly, the motion detector beeped twice faster. Closer. Jacob turned off the console lights and motioned for Sari to be quiet. They crouched behind the supply crates, breathing in silence. Then, a thump, footsteps outside, heavy boots crunching softly over the sand. A voice followed mechanical, filtered through a helmet. Thermal scan detects 2 lifeforms inside. "Target likely present. Prepare breach," Sari gasped, covering her mouth. Jacob gently touched her shoulder, signaling her to stay calm. The shuttle door sparked, then exploded open with a bang. 2 armored figures rushed in, holding high-tech rifles. Red visors glowing in the dark, hands up. One shouted, "Return the female, and we won't harm you." Jacob stepped into the light, both hands raised but the pistol hidden behind his belt. "Who are you people?" he asked. "Why are you hunting a girl who can barely walk?" "Shh." "Property," the taller one said coldly. "Owned by House Zevkar Shiran, and we were paid to clean up the mistake." "She's a person," Jacob growled. "Not a thing. Not your concern. Human," the other replied. "Hand her over or die with her," before either hunter could move. Jacob pulled his pistol and fired. The first shot hit the shorter bounty hunter's chest, shorting his shield. The second hit him in the side of the helmet, knocking him down. Sari screamed, ducking behind the crates. The taller one opened fire. Jacob rolled, took cover, and returned shots with sharp precision. He moved like a trained soldier because he was one once. The fight shook the entire shuttle. Sparks flying from the walls, metal groaning under impact. Sari Peakdotand saw the hunter creeping toward Jacob's flank. Without thinking, she grabbed the shock knife and crawled behind the crates. Her heart pounded, her breath short, but she didn't stop when the hunter stepped into position. Aiming at Jacob's back, Sari jumped. She drove the blade into the back of his armor. The shock discharging loudly, the hunter roared, swung back, and smacked her to the ground, but that gave Jacob the time he needed. He fired a shot straight into the hunter's chest, dropping him. Silence followed, only the sound of Sari gasping on the floor. Jacob rushed over and held her gently, checking her injuries. "You okay?" he asked, worried. She nodded, eyes wide in shock. "I stabbed someone," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Jacob smiled softly. "You saved my life," he said. "That wasn't just someone, that was a killer." She trembled in his arms, her fingers clinging to his shirt. "I didn't know I could do it." "I was so scared, you did it anyway," he said. "That's what bravery is." They stayed like that for a long minute. The danger passed, but the fear still fresh. Then Jacob stood. checking the bounty hunter's equipment, high grade. Tech, he muttered. These weren't freelancers, they were hired directly by her family. He looked back at Sari. This won't be the last time, he said quietly. They'll keep sending more. Sari looked down at her hands, stained with dust. Blood and electricity burns. I don't want to run anymore, she said. I want to fight. Stand by your side. Jacob nodded. Then we'll get ready. That night, Jacob upgraded the shuttle's perimeter defenses. Sari helped, however. She could passing tools, monitoring screens, watching Jacob work. They didn't speak much, but something between them had changed. Not just trust, something deeper, unspoken. Building slowly like fire beneath the surface. Outside, the desert was quiet again, but both of them knew it was only for now. Because the galaxy was a cruel place, and Sari had just proven she wasn't going down without a fight. The desert. Sun rose again, painting the sky in gold and pink, inside the broken shuttle. Sari opened her eyes slowly. Her body still ached, but her mind was sharper than ever before. Something had changed. She no longer felt like a burden. She felt needed. Jacob was already awake, kneeling beside a spread of mechanical parts. He was repairing the shuttle's shield generator using old wires and recycled circuits from the bounty hunter's armor. When he noticed Sari sitting up, he smiled. Faintly, morning, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. You slept through the night, she nodded. My dreams weren't full of vultures this time. She said softly. Jacob chuckled. Well, I guess that's progress. He handed her a metal cup filled with warm broth. Sari took it carefully, sipping slowly. Then she said, I want to help. Jacob looked at her, eyebrows raised. You already did. You saved me. No, she said quickly. I want to do more, not just sit here. Jacob studied her face, saw the fire in her eyes. She wasn't the same broken girl he had found in the sand. He nodded. All right, he said, standing. Let's start with something simple. He led her outside to a small clearing behind the shuttle. There, he had set up a target made of scrap metal and wires. He placed the pulse pistol in her hands, carefully guiding her fingers. Hold it steady, he instructed. Keep your elbows loose, not stiff. Sari's hands trembled slightly, but she focused. When the shot fired and hit the edge of the target, she gasped in surprise. Jacob smiled. Not bad for a first time. They spent hours that morning training. Sari learned how to aim, how to stay calm under pressure, and even how to reload the weapon. Her movements were still slow because of her leg. But she didn't complain when she grew tired. Jacob crafted a stronger brace using metal from a broken drone. He strapped it gently around her leg, adjusting it with care. When she took her first step with it, she stumbled but caught herself. Jacob clapped softly. You're walking again? Sari looked at her foot, then back at him, a smile spreading across her lips. For the first time in years, she said, her voice shaking, I feel like I can stand on my own later. They sat together in the shade of the shuttle wing, eating dried rations and watching the horizon. Sari asked him questions about Earth, about oceans, music, trees, and stars. Jacob spoke softly, painting pictures of green forests, rainy nights, and fireflies glowing in the dark. Her eyes sparkled as she listened. Your world sounds like a dream, she whispered. It sounds like home. Jacob paused, his voice softer now. You could come with me, if we survive this if. We get off this planet too, can start over. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. Would they even allow me? I'm not human. You're more human than most, he said. You care, you fight, you hope. Silence fell between them, not awkward. Just full. She reached out hesitantly and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. That night, sandstorm rolled across the desert. The wind howled and rattled the shuttle's metal walls. Inside, Sari and Jacob sat close to the heater, wrapped in layers of old blankets. The power flickered, and everything felt a little smaller, a little darker. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you think they'll come again?" she asked. "The ones who want me dead." Jacob nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "They will. Then why don't you leave me?" she asked suddenly. "I'm the reason you're in danger. I was just supposed to be a problem left." In the sand, he looked down at her, his voice calm. "Because I don't abandon people. I was abandoned once. And I promised I'd never do that to anyone else." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She just held his hand tighter. In that moment, neither of them felt alone anymore. Sari had been taught to believe that broken things were to be thrown away, but this human, this stranger, had looked at her scars and still reached out. He didn't see weakness. He saw someone worth fighting for. And now? She was ready to fight too. Outside, lightning cracked across the alien sky. But inside the shuttle, warmth bloomed in the quiet space between them. The bond between them was no longer just survival. It was trust. It was connection. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of love. Asterisk. The morning began to quietly. The wind had stopped, and not a single insect buzzed in the dry air. Jacob stood outside the shuttle, eyes scanning the dunes. A strange chill running through his spine. Sari stepped out behind him, now walking. Better with her brace, she followed his gaze and asked softly, "Something wrong?" He nodded. "The desert's never silent," he said, "which means something's coming." They didn't have to wait long. A high-pitched screech echoed in the distance, followed by another, louder, closer. Jacob's hand moved to his pistol. Sari reached for the small rifle he'd taught her to use. And then, rising over the ridge, came the beasts. Not just one, not just two, but a pack of vulture creatures. Their wings spread wide, shadows blotting the twin suns behind them. Their bodies were lean and sharp, beaks glowing faintly with acidic saliva, eyes burning red. They didn't fly, not yet. They were stalking, watching, testing the air. "They remember me," Sari whispered, frozen for a second. "They were circling when I was dying in the sand." Jacob stepped in front of her. "Not this time," he said, voice low but steady. "They're not getting close." But the beasts weren't afraid. They moved in a half circle, slowly surrounding the shuttle like hunters closing in on cornered prey. Then, without warning, the largest one let out a roar and charged. Jacob fired first, the blast hitting the creature's shoulder. It screamed but didn't fall. Another leapt, wings flapping, claws outstretched. Sari fired, shaking but steady, hitting it mid-air. It crashed to the ground and rolled. Screeching in pain, the attack had begun. Jacob and Sari stood side by side, taking shot after shot, the air filled with heat, dust, and the cries of furious monsters. Jacob moved fast, his training sharp. Sari stayed close, covering his blind spots. They moved like a team, like they had fought together for years. But then, the alpha beast came forward, twice as big as the rest, wings spread wide like black sails. It let out a screech that rattled the metal shuttle walls, then it flew straight at them. Jacob pushed Sari out of the way and rolled to the left, firing up at the beast, but its armor was thick. The shots bounced off its chest. Sari hit the sand hard, her leg brace snapping. With a loud crack, she cried out, unable to stand. The beast landed between them, snarling, ready to strike. Jacob ran toward it, yelling to draw its attention. He tossed a smoke flare, confusing the beast. Then he grabbed a long metal rod and stabbed it into the side of its head. The beast roared in fury, shaking its head violently, but it wasn't going down. And Jacob was out of ammo. It raised its massive clarity to rip him apart. Sorry. He shouted, now. Despite the pain, Sari forced herself up, crawling to the fallen shock rifle. Her hands bled from crawling across the rocky sand. But she grabbed the weapon, aimed at the beast's eye, and pulled the trigger. The blast was clean, direct, and loud. The alpha screeched, then dropped like a stone. Silence. Dust floated through the air, broken only by Sari's heavy breathing and Jacob's slow steps. He reached her and pulled her into his arms. You did it, he whispered. You saved. Me again? She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. No. She said softly. We saved each other. The other vulture creatures scattered. Seeing their leader fall, within minutes, the desert was quiet against just the wind. Finally returning, Jacob carried her back into the shuttle, laying her down gently. Her leg was worse now. But she didn't care. All she could think about was the way Jacob had thrown himself in front of danger for her, and how she had risked everything to protect him as he began building a stronger brace. This time, using the armor plating from the dead beast, she watched him work. You're not like anyone I've ever known, she said quietly. Jacob glanced at her, confused. You mean humans? No, she said. I mean people. You see worth in what others throw away. He finished adjusting the brace and smiled. You're not something thrown away. Sorry, he said. You're the strongest person I've ever met. That night, the stars over the desert were clear and bright. Sari and Jacob sat outside, a fire burning between them. They didn't speak much, just shared the warmth. The silence was no longer scary in the dark. Sari leaned closer and whispered, Next time something comes for us, I won't be afraid. Jacob looked at her and replied, You were never afraid. Sorry, you just didn't know it yet. The desert was quiet again. But Jacob didn't trust it anymore. Silence, heed. Learned often meant something worse was coming. Inside the shuttle, Sari adjusted her new armored leg brace. Made from the vulture beast's plating, it was heavier but stronger. And it felt like a part of her now. She had earned it. Jacob checked the perimeter sensors, then turned to her. If they come again, he said carefully, it won't be scavengers. Sari looked up, her face calm. I know, she replied. They'll send my family. And they did. Just before sunset, a sleek black transport ship broke through the clouds. It made no sound, but the dust it stirred created a roaring storm across the dunes. Jacob and Sari stood outside, side by side, watching it descend. The ship landed with perfect grace. The doors opened slowly. And out stepped 4 armored guards, Bane behind them. Him, tall, proud, face sharp like a blade. The alien male wore noble robes of deep violet with golden rings on his horns. Sari stiffened beside Jacob. That's Varen, she said in a whisper. My arranged mate. Varen stepped forward. Voice cold as ice. Well, he said, smirking. You didn't die after all. What a disappointment. Sari didn't flinch. I see your manners haven't improved. She said quietly. Varen's eyes narrowed. You're coming with me, he snapped. Your family has revoked your exile. Your body still belongs. To the contract, Jacob stepped forward. She doesn't belong to anyone. He said, his voice calm but firm. Varen looked at him like a bug under his shoe. And who are you, human? Her new master. He sneered. Jacob didn't blink. I'm the one who saved her. And I'll die before I let you take her. Varen's smile vanished. So be it, he said. Raising his hand, his guards aimed their weapons. Lasers lighting up Jacob's chest, but before they could fire, Sari stepped forward. No, she said, loud and clear. I will speak. Everyone paused, even Varen. Surprised by her voice, I am not yours, she continued. My blood may come from House Sevkar, but my spirit is mine. You left me to die in the sand, but I didn't die. She walked forward, slowly. her step steady despite the heavy brace. "I stood again," she said. "I learned to fight, to live, to matter not because of you. But because of him," she pointed at Jacob. "He didn't ask who I was," she continued. "He didn't see a broken leg or a failed contract. He saw a person." Varen's eyes flared with anger. "You speak like a traitor," he growled. "You would choose a human over your own blood." Sari stood tall. "I would choose freedom," she said. "And if that means standing beside a human, then yes. I choose him." For a moment, the air held still like the galaxy itself was waiting. Then Varen shouted, "Seize them both." The guards moved, but not fast enough. Jacob pulled his pistol and shot the first one in the leg. Sari spun behind a crate and fired her rifle, hitting another guard in the shoulder. Smoke filled the air as sparks flew from laser fire. The fight was fast, brutal. Jacob and Sari moved together like they'd trained for years. A guard grabbed Sari's arm. She dropped her weapon and drove her elbow into his throat. Jacob disarmed another with a blast to his belt. Within minutes, the guards were down, groaning, unconscious or disarmed. Varen stood alone now, trembling with rage. "You think this ends here?" he hissed. "You've shamed your entire bloodline. There will be a bounty on both your heads." Jacob walked up slowly. "No," he said, pointing his weapon straight at Varen's chest. "This ends now." But Sari placed a hand on Jacob's arm. "Let him go," she said. "He wants revenge, but we won't become like them." Jacob hesitated, then lowered his weapon. Varen looked at her with disgust. "You're nothing," he spat. But she didn't even blink. "No," she said softly, "I'm finally someone." Varen turned and left, dragging his wounded pride back onto the ship. The vessel rose and vanished into the sky. The silence after was long and strange. Like the desert had been holding its breath. Jacob sat down on a rock, breathing hard. Sari joined him, their shoulders touching. "You didn't have to let him go," Jacob said. "I know," she replied, "but if I killed him, I'd still be their daughter." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "You're nothing like them." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And you're nothing like the monsters they warned us about." Together, they sat under the stars, not as alien and human, not as broken and whole, but as equals. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, the story of a girl left to die had become the story of a warrior who chose to live. The stars above the desert were brighter than ever before. Sari stood outside the old shuttle, the wind brushing her silver hair softly. The fight was over, the danger gone for now, but something inside her had changed forever. Jacob walked up behind her, carrying a backpack filled with salvaged tools and dried supplies. He stopped beside her and looked out at the endless dunes. "We did it," he said quietly. "We survived." Sari nodded slowly, her gaze still on the stars. "I never thought I'd see another sunrise after that day in the sand," she whispered. "But you didn't just give me water. You gave me back my name." He smiled, not saying anything. She turned to face him fully. "What happens now?" she asked. "Will they keep chasing us?" "Maybe," Jacob replied, "but we're not staying here to find out." He reached into his pack and pulled out a small, glowing disc-they emergency beacon stolen from Varen's ship. "Signal's clean," he said. "Galactic Council patrols monitor this channel. They'll come, and when they do," Sari asked, unsure, "they'll know who I am." Jacob shook his head. "No," he said. "They'll see who you became." It took 3 days before a rescue vessel landed on the outer ridge. The ship was smaller than Varen's, but stronger. Official markings etched into the hull. Out came two council officers, both surprised to find a human and an exiled alien noble waiting side by side. Jacob did the talking. He explained the abandonment, the bounty hunters, the vultures, the bloodline. Politics. Sari stood beside him through it all, silent but proud when they asked her to speak. She told them everything, every ugly truth she had been forced to live with. At the end, the council officer nodded slowly. "You are no longer part of House Zevkar," he declared. "By law, you are a political refugee. You may seek asylum anywhere." Jacob glanced at her. "I'm heading back to Earth," he said gently. "There's space for you. You want it?" Sari looked at the ship behind her. Then she looked at the human beside her, and she smiled. "I don't care where I go," she said, "as long as I go with you." Weeks later, Earth welcomed them with the soft sound of waves and the smell of wet trees. Sari stood barefoot in the grass, toes sinking into the soil. The sky was blue, not purple, and the air smelled clean and full of life. Jacob's house wasn't much a small cottage on the edge of a forest, but to Sari, it was everything. He gave her the bigger room with the sunlight window. She filled it with plants, tiny crystals, and things that made her feel safe. Jacob taught her how to cook over a flame, how to read old Earth books, how to sit still and enjoy the quiet. Sometimes they would sit together in silence, just watching the fire burn. One night, Sari looked up from a book and said, "I've never felt so real before." Jacob looked at her with a soft smile. "That's because you were never allowed to be real before." They shared meals, they shared stories, and slowly, they shared hearts. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't forced. It grew like roots under the soil, strong and unseen, until one day it bloomed. Sari walked outside one evening and saw Jacob repairing an old wooden fence. She sat on the steps and asked, "If I hadn't been thrown into that desert, do you think we would have ever met?" He stopped, looked at her, and said, "I don't know, but I do know this: whatever it took, I'm glad it happened." She nodded, smiling, then stood and walked over, wrapping her arms around him. "I used to think being broken meant I didn't deserve love," she whispered, "but now I know. Being broken is what brought me to you." The stars that night seemed to shine just for them. Jacob held her hand, and Sari leaned her head on his shoulder. In that quiet place, far from bloodlines, betrayal, and pain, she had found something no one could take from her: a new name, a new future, a new life. And as the wind blew gently across the forest, Jacob whispered the only thing that needed to be said: "You're home."